Natalie Torres-Haddad and Laura Yamanaka. So Natalie is a 2-time TEDx speaker. She's a personal financial wellness advocate. She is the bilingual host of the podcast, Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes, and I can see her book behind her, Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes. So make sure you check that out on Amazon or wherever you get your books, because it's a wonderful read and very informative. So thanks for being here, Natalie. Laura is the co-president, founder of, I'm losing track, but teamCFO, and what her firm does is provides outsourced resources that are CFO and accounting resources that are so important to small businesses. She works with small business to medium businesses. She has, gosh, Laura, 20 plus years working for some of the most important accounting firms in the world. And many of you likely recognize Laura. Does her face look familiar to you? Because she's also the former chair of NAWBO. So she has a very long history of supporting women entrepreneurs, and we're so grateful to have you both here. So welcome, Natalie, welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me. So glad to be here.
So we have a lot to dive in to discuss today, and we decided to bring you both together for 2 reasons. One is you're both on the same mission, which is to empower women with the financial tools, financial resources they need and deserve to scale their business, right? Yes. And I see our questions are up. I want to remind everyone we've received so many questions from our community via our inbox. So today, in today's Ask Me Anything with Natalie and Laura, we're going to cover those questions first. And then we're going to save time at the end for your live questions. So feel free, I see some already, but feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box below, and we're going to get to as many as possible, okay? So as I was saying, Laura, Natalie, we brought you together because you're on a mission to empower women. You have 2 sides of the brain, right? So Laura, you have this CFO accounting background of decades of excellence in accounting and finance. And Natalie, you come at finance from a personal well-being aspect as well. And what we know is so many women in our community are dealing with running their businesses, homeschooling their children, dealing with a pandemic, dealing with very important movements in our society, including Black Lives Matter and many more, and while also trying to get our financials in decent shape during the worst economic turndown for small businesses. So we're so excited to have you both here today to talk about both sides of the coin. And one thing I know Natalie and Laura and I have talked about is this whole idea, this whole bias stereotype that women are bad with money and it's our fault. And so today our mission is really to demystify that, provide real truth in the fact that women often don't have the resources. We don't often have conversations about money, so we avoid it. And Laura and Natalie are going to be a great resource for everyone here today to like hone in, talk through what do you need to focus on first for your business. So we're so excited to dive in. Laura, do you have anything to add? Natalie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we're not here to demystify this. We're here to blow up that myth, because it is a myth that if you give into and you accept as a truth, you know, you're down 50% already. So I know the work that Natalie does, the work that I do, it's really the same work. It's the right and the left hand. It's attached to the same body, and I'm so excited that Tory Burch, you know, and Gabriel, you've put together this group to really look at things holistically, because I believe, to make a generalization, women, we look at things holistically. It's very hard for us, like sometimes men really focus on one. They're very good at get those sales up, they get those sales up. Oh, we have to take care of our people. Oh, you didn't say that, or I can't do 2 things at once. I do one thing. Women do naturally both things. So I think this is an ideal context, ideal conversation, ideal opportunity to really address the whole woman. Because as you said, we're doing a lot of things at the same time. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Ditto to both of what you're saying. I think it's understanding that we can't always separate the two, but today
Yes.
that's what we're going to talk about, some of the stuff that we've gone through, what we've seen our clients go through, and more importantly, how we can get past that. Because yes, when there are myths, when there's these stereotypes, it's a way to belittle our work. And the whole point is today you're going to walk away with not only those tools, but the confidence you need to make sure to move forward and say, you know what, maybe I messed up back then, but today I know better and I'm going to do better.
Great. Well, let's dive right in on that note. Laura, let's start with you.
Okay.
We've received so many different topics to cover today. So where should our community of incredible business owners even begin? What are the key ingredients they should focus on for their financial health in the midst of this pandemic and these uncertain times?
Okay, so I'm going to sound not like a finance and accounting person when I said the first thing we have to address is in our head. Before you get to the P&L, the balance sheet, the cash, and whatever, because the battle, and it is a battle right now. We're battling for survival right now, and that starts here. So first we have to believe we can do it. And it's very easy for me to say that, right? And if we could all twang it, then we'd be all billionaires right now. But it doesn't work that way. That's something we have to constantly work at. And I don't care, you look at the most successful women in the world, and they will all share with you, they all have self-doubt. You know, they just don't let it impact the actions that they take. So the first thing I would say is recognize where you are. Okay, believe that you're in the same boat with a lot of other women, and they're able to be successful in spite of it. And we'll get into, I'm sure, more of the nuts and bolts and blocking and tackling. But if I had one wish in the world, win the battle here. Start the battle here. You can do it. We all can do it.
And Natalie, let's start with that battle here. So as I said, we're all dealing with stress, anxiety on top of many roles. So what can we be doing mentally so that we're in a stronger place financially from a health perspective?
Yes, we have to really understand that many of us, especially women, deal with the imposter syndrome. And it has a lot to do with what we've not only experienced in the past, but what we've been taught. And how do we shift ourselves away from feeling that way? I mean, I know I deal with it, I think, every day. You know, it just depends on how well my day is going, or maybe I'm now challenged with something new. I always tell people it's important to be able to make a list for yourself. So your weaknesses and your strengths, whether your weakness might be your finances. I know a lot of women, especially when they're in business, they're like, oh, I'm not the strongest. I'm not the financial expert. I'm like, I'm not an accountant either. I love my accountant because they know, they guide me in that way. So I know what my weaknesses are. And especially when you're forming partnerships, when you're collaborating with other people, when you're pitching yourself, not just to get clients, but really to work with other people as well, is understanding how you can come to the table with those strengths, right? And so that will not only help boost that confidence that you need, but it also just reminds you that you worked to where you are today. So, it's funny when people say, oh, you've accomplished this and this and that. And I go, yeah, that took me 20 something years, or that took me 5 years to do. Or guess what? I failed 3 times prior. And somehow the 4th time, not only did I learn from my mistakes, but it was just the right timing, right? So I always come across a lot of women that feel discouraged and say, you know what, I tried it, it didn't work, or I had this bad experience. And then I said, did you look back and see where your faults were? Because we all go through that, especially if you didn't come up in a home where you were filled with entrepreneurs, right? Or maybe you came from a lack of scarcity. And so now you're really conditioning yourself on how do you take a charge of that money mindset that you need to have, how to become more financially literate, right? And so understanding that that's a whole language in itself. And I always talk about that because English is my second language, but I explain to people, it's an evolving language. It takes time. Same thing with your money, same thing with your finances, especially when you are not only dealing with your personal finances, but your business finances as well.
So as we go through each topic, we're really focused on talking about both the personal side and the business, because they really can't be totally separate. But Laura, What if you have a great idea for a business, but your personal finances are in total disarray? What's your advice there?
Okay, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's extremely rare that I see somebody who is a mess personally and fabulous business-wise. The same habits that you, an approach that you take with your business or your personal is going to bleed over to your business. So I like to say, I'm not saying you have to be an accountant. I'm not saying you have to, run around and know all these numbers and metrics. There's certain things you have to know, simple things. And when I'm going to talk to you about this, there's all these big accounting words and terms and algorithms and spreadsheets, but they all come down to the same thing, right? Which is, how much money are you bringing in? Where's it coming from? And how well you can predict that. Personally, it's the same way. Most people have a paycheck, right? So they know, oh, I'm getting so much money every month because I've worked so many hours or I have my salary. During these COVID times, that's not a given anymore, right? So you're having to take that same approach that you said on your personal side to your business side and say, wow, I used to be able to count on so much money every month from these clients, these businesses, whatever. Can't do that anymore, right? So you're doing the same thing, just the numbers are probably a lot more bigger on this side. So you need to know where your money's coming from. And I'm not saying exactly, ranges. I work in ranges a lot. This is what it used to be. What was it for the first 6 months of the year? What did we think reasonably will happen in the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year? And also, when you're looking at your personal finances, right, you know when things are tight and you're not sure if money coming in, there's actions you take. You go, I maybe shouldn't buy that, whatever it is, or maybe we need to eat at home more. Maybe we need to eat macaroni and cheese, which actually I love. So anyway, same thing on your business. Yeah, I know. Really, it's my great excuse. I'm being economical. God, I love that stuff. Anyway, same thing with your business. What are the expenses that we could do without, defer, reduce? Not saying you're going to do it, but start to think about it so you can start to put together a plan in place. And then, yes, I'd like to see it in paper. I'd like to see it converted over to a budget, but mostly understanding the ins and outs of your business. What is your business like? How does it work? They call it, what is your business model? And but basically it's saying, how are you going to sell something? What is it going to cost you? And how much is left over for you?
So 2 follow-up questions to that from our live chat. One, Coco is asking for any reading recommendations for creating a business plan, and I have one. If you go to the Tory Burch Foundation website, we have a whole dynamic business plan builder that follows you with instructions as you type, and then it becomes your custom business plan builder. So that's a great tool for you, Coco. Another person is asking specifically from a financial planning perspective, how should you manage your finances for your business versus your personal money? Do you keep them separate?
Yes.
And how do you make sure that both are in good shape?
Okay. So I believe in starting in one place at one time. To be honest, practice on your personal first. If you haven't really started up or your business isn't significant, if you've got both going, and if your business is your primary income and it's not really just kind of supplementing you, focus on your business first, because you don't have time to practice anymore. So look at your business side first and start with the basics. There's so many things. It depends on where you are. Are you start a business? Are you small business? Are you large business? You're going to have to approach things differently and have different support. But no matter if you're working and dealing with CFOs and accountants and tax people at this level, we all want to know, what is your business? How are you going to make money in these COVID times? Can you make money in these COVID times? I have clients that right now making tons of money. They thought they were in a very good position to weather COVID because they didn't have inventory, they didn't have a lot of people. What they were brokers, and they imported business products from all over the world, and they passed it on to different retail. And it turns out, I was saying, yes, you're not having to carry that inventory. You don't have a warehouse, but you can't get it. You can't be shipped in to this country. So therefore, you really don't have a business now, and you're going to have to pivot.
If I can
jump in.
Yeah, please, Natalie.
I think she's right on point. Lauren knows exactly what she's talking about. And I think depending on how many women on this call are startups, whether you're in your first or 2 years, really take account of what your seasons are. So I know I always watch Shark Tank, and when I see, we're going to project this much the next year, and I'm like, they don't even know their seasons yet, right? We all have that, especially if you're in retail, if you're hospitality. It depends what your business is, but really start to pay attention, like, oh, you know what, the summer is my slowest, or the holiday season happens to be my busiest moment. So it's understanding that you do have moments where your business is doing really well. And like she said, you're going to have to separate the two to figure out what that is. But don't be so hard on yourself when you're like, oh my gosh, it's slow right now. Well, understand that, you know what, maybe because people aren't necessarily buying your product or your service during a specific time, but then you start gearing her up and saying, like, I know for myself, oh, these are the months that it's like I'm nonstop. And then the months that I need to make sure I have enough to get past, that little hurdle. And then once again, it starts over. So understanding that you know when and where you should be really gearing up, especially when you have a team that you're working with too.
Mm-hmm. Natalie,
I was going to say,
go ahead, Laura.
I just wanted to say that is so important. Like, how many business owners, they don't know where their business comes from. They don't know who their customers are. They used to, when they used to do the sales themselves, but maybe they hired somebody, they think it's a machine and it's going, and pretty soon they don't know who they're selling to. They don't know their customers, who's at risk. And in order for, when you're dealing with a financial person, I'm going to come in and I'm going to ask you, if I'm going to help you put together a business plan, a projection, I'm going to say, okay, historically, this is what you've had coming in as revenue. How many customers do you have? What's the average amount they spend? Is this discretionary? Is this an essential service, right? Where are you demographically? So you need to know who your customers are, or else you're kind of playing at your business. It's a hobby.
And we have a number of great webinars on knowing your customer. So check out our YouTube for all of our past webinars on that topic. Should be very helpful. Natalie, just a follow-up question to you though. From a financial planning, I love that you mentioned like Shark Tank. People say, oh, my business will be worth $1 million next year, but they have 0 sales today. So how does one go about financial planning and projections without over-planning, especially during a time like this where we don't know, like we have an election coming up. We have so many unknown events. So what would you recommend from a cadence perspective? Like how many months out do you plan for? What do you recommend?
Absolutely. If you can plan, and I know for a lot of people that sounds really daunting to think ahead of the future when you're just trying to make it this month. But I would recommend at least 12 months, because then that really gives you an idea of what your seasons look like. And if you don't have anything to relate and say, oh, I haven't been in business very long, then the research really does come into play when you can look at what your industry is actually doing. And I know many of us are like, we pride and enjoy our services, our products, and say it's the best. But if I always think of the worst case scenario and say like, okay, what if I am the bottom in the industry? I'm just starting out. Who am I really competing with, right? And so that's the one that'll help you also market yourself as far as price-wise. It'll also hopefully elevate you and say, oh, you know what? In 2 years, I'm going to be able to make sure I'm always charging this amount, because that's what the industry is calling for. But at least 12 months, and if you can go even further, even better. And I'm sure Laura can give you a little bit more on that. But the reason why is once you really start to figure out that not only you are going to understand your industry better, and doing that research, you're like, where do I begin? I mean, there's just so many different, obviously Tory Burch Foundation, make sure you're connected with it, but the SBA, Small Business Administration, there's a lot of free courses that we pay as taxpayers that most people don't know you could take advantage of, and they will actually do the research for you. So you can go in and say, this is my industry, and I mean, they can be as specific as you need it to be, right? If you're in textiles, in exporting, or whatever it might be, they do the work for you as well. But now, because you can do a lot of it on your own online, that also helps you come up with the benchmark. And ask people within your industry, this is why you have this group of, there's more than 300 people on this call, right? And guess what? I'm sure many of you have similarities. And so that's a place where you can start having that conversation Because for me, I have accountability group. I'm like, does this work for you? How much are you charging? How much did they pay? You know, because it really does help not only validate your work, but it also keeps you understanding that for me, especially when I'm asking for a lot of money, it's like, I know what my worth is. I know how much people have paid. I know how to defend that as well. So for you, if you have a service or product, that's going to be very helpful.
Love the idea of an accountability group. And to your point, Natalie, there are so many resources. NAWBO, we've mentioned. SCORE is a great resource. Women business centers that are all around the country that very few people know about can be a great resource for you. So let's talk a little bit about loans, because we're getting a number of questions about that topic. Where does someone even go today for a loan? And how do you calculate, this might be a question for Laura, how do you calculate how much money you should take out when your sales may be frozen or you don't know what the future looks like?
So one of the best things that I always tell people, and this is information for later and not now, is you borrow money when you don't need it. Okay, you just borrow money, you get a line of credit, you get money when you don't need it. It's going to cost you. But when you need the money is when you're least attractive to a lender. So the order of approaching people to get money is usually friends and family first, you know, when you're starting out financing. Self-financing through credit card savings, I really don't like to do it, but a high percentage of people do it. And then going to the banks. Right now, the banks, and they're doing their best for us, and they understand how they function in this economy. But banks look at businesses and they say, do I want to borrow? Do I want to lend money to a business? And the way they do that is they look at your historical information, what you're currently doing, what you think you're going to do, the economic environment, and looking at you personally. Right now, it is a very hard time. Okay, and I know I have clients that have tried to go for additional funds because they didn't believe me. And I said, get the money. I don't need it. I've got all this money in the account, and boom, it goes like that. So you always want to have a line that you can draw on. In fact, during that space in February, March for us, we had our clients draw down on their lines, okay, because they can't take it away from you when you have it, because some people did have their lines frozen at that point in time. If they hadn't drawn down, no. So it is going to be tough. I mean, clearly, you know, the government, you could have gotten PPP, the EIDL loans. I think there's going to be another stimulus package that comes into place. But again, it is better to have a plan in place and have had the funds earlier. You're behind the gun right now. If you're really in bad shape, like I said, friends, family, credit card accessing, those are things you could do. Your bank, going into the relationship. This is why you need a banking relationship. You make that relationship now when things are good. Find somebody and a bank who's going to grow with you. So even you are never too small to have a banking relationship. For people who have just started out, they only have a personal banking. Start there. Many banks, credit unions do business or personal and do business. Go in and talk to them. Don't do it on the phone, because you have to establish that relationship. Go in with your mask, call somebody up. I want to make an appointment. And then understand, you just don't walk in and get the loan. It's like anything else. You know, you have to invest in a relationship. Ask people in your industry. So in LA, it's kind of funny. We have entertainment industry, and there were people who are in the entertainment industry who would apply to regular banks, and they would say, no, we cannot finance this. And they would go to this particular bank that focused on the entertainment, and boom, they would get the money because they understood the risk level. Banks have different, same thing for the fashion industry. There's certain banks that are very good at it. Find out where your industry banks, you know, locally.
Well, I'm glad you brought up credit unions, because I feel like that's an underutilized resource. And banks, people often go to a big bank expecting they're going to have an easy time getting in the door, and that's not always the case. So
the relationship, and think about it this way. If you were going in to network into a room, sometimes isn't it easier to network in a small group of 20 people or to a conference of 2,000, right? So again, I'm not saying that everybody for the appropriate time, but if you're starting, it is the relationship really, really helps. Develop the relationship with that banker, because they will move and you will have access to different banks, and more than one. Never put all your eggs in one basket. 3 bankers.
3.
I always like to have rule of 3. Like 3, more than one. I think of 3 as a tripod, right? I'd love to have 4. We don't have the energy and the time to devote to that. But usually 3, 1 can fail and you're still kind of like stabilized, right? So if you only have 1, you have to start over. 3, and it doesn't take that much time. It sounds like a big deal. Oh, this is my other thing. I ask people, just especially in the beginning, and you will spend more time later as you become larger, just spend 1 hour a week on finances. It could be educational, it could be on your own, it could be personal. 1 hour a week. You'd be amazed at if you do, or 1 hour a week, how that adds up. It's
Laura, when we thought about this workshop, the whole focus is we tied it to fitness, right? Because who wants to wake up at 5 in the morning and exercise? None of us. But once we do consistently, we start to see the change and the results and the health benefits. And the same is certainly true. And Natalie, I know you have a lot to add to this topic for being healthy from a financial perspective. So what other routines can we all adopt personally or for our business from a financial perspective, besides dedicating 1 hour a week? I love that. Love the idea of an accountability group. Natalie, what other tips do you have for us?
Yeah, it's how often you do it, right? It's not necessarily how long you do it for. I actually do I always say 20 minutes a day. When you're learning a language, that's what they recommend. It's not doing too much, because then you're just kind of over it. And so having some kind of routine in place. So whether, like she said, today, this counts as something, right? Because all of you are learning not only helpful tips in that, this is an hour of your time that you're investing in, right? But really understanding that maybe you have certain days, like Mondays and Wednesdays can be let me look at my balance sheet. Tuesdays and Thursdays can be when I tap into my mentor, my accountability partner. Right now with taxes, it's like tapping in with your CPA, whoever your accountant is. And understanding that counts as part of it, because every time you talk to someone else, that happens to me all the time. I'm like, oh, that's a new term I'm learning, or I've been using the term wrong. And so it does take time, but when we start doing it often enough, then it becomes almost like, oh, it's not a big deal. Especially when you're paying your bills, especially when you have a routine in place. I actually tell people, make a date with yourself. Whenever I'm paying bills, it's like a spa-like experience. I have the candles, I always have my calming tea, never caffeine, music, whatever helps to put yourself in that state of mind where you're like, okay, I'm doing this. It's going to be a great experience. Or at least as calming as it can be, because it can be really stressful. But for me, I treat myself after, like it's either a bath or it's something that, I go on a nice walk with my dogs, and that's where I, could keep coming in. So it's understanding that there is a place where, you have that opportunity, right? And so making sure that we have an idea of what we can do every single day. So, you have so many different resources, and I want to give a shout out to Tory Burch, because I saw you guys on the Fast Company article where it gave the top 15 places to apply for applications for women. And obviously you guys were part of that. And I think that was incredible to be able to see, just taking, 10 minutes to read that article. And then all of a sudden you learn about what they're looking for, what requirements they're looking for. And I saw a few people on their chat already putting, I don't qualify right now. What do I need to do? Well, team up with somebody else that does, because maybe you have a strength that they don't. And now you're also building on that and say, okay, maybe in 3 years or next year, I'll be able to apply. So don't get yourself out of the race, just keep yourself little by little every single day. Right? I always tell people I'm like the turtle, I'm going to go slow, but I will learn as I go.
And, that's such an important point, right? Because like usually I'm just saying just 1 hour a week, but if you really want to step it up, everything you do in your business brings in money or costs money. And every decision you make or every action that you're taking to review something I think it's really important if you know exactly, like I'm going over a sales report right now or talking to my salespeople about they need to be doing something better. I know that's a revenue level, right? That I'm focusing. I know exactly on my balance sheet or my P&L where it's showing up. So it doesn't have to be this mysterious thing. Oh, it's the P&L. I don't really know what it means. And I rely on somebody else to tell me what it means. No, it's yours. So what you have to do is start to like, don't listen, I should say this, don't listen to those accountants who are making it hard for you or want to keep you kind of ignorant because they talk and use all these terminologies. Find someone who can sit down and you have a question with them. Like, Natalie said, it was great. You have a preset meeting with them. Say, where does this cost end up on my P&L? So you're not surprised every month when you're going, I don't know whose business this is because it's not mine. Why don't I have any more cash like I thought I would? You should never have those questions. Well, if you have those questions, I think it means the sign's wrong. But if you understand your business, you understand every action of what it takes to run your business, produce your widget, sell your widget, store your widget, it has a very specific line on your profit and loss statement, on your balance sheet that you know where this information resides. So then when you start to look at those routinely, because you are going to, you know exactly where to adjust, because it's always about adjusting. It's not you set a plan in place, a business plan or projection, I don't care what it is, and you just go and it sits up here. If you are, think about it this way, you're spending money on accounting, or you're spending time on accounting. It's not something you have to do. Make it, well, you do have to do it for taxes and stuff, but if you have to do it, make it work for you. So it's up to you to say, hey, whomever's doing your accounting and finance, help me understand how is this showing up and how I can change this. If you just do that one thing, and if you don't know, you're going to see a huge difference in your operation and your bottom line.
Well, we were saying this topic is a lot like going to the dentist, where maybe you think you might have a cavity, but you don't really want to go to the dentist. And as you ignore it, it gets worse and worse and worse. And then you have a root canal, right?
Yep.
And so I love, Natalie, I've never thought about having a spa date when I pay my bills and go through all of my financials, but I love that. So I'll be bringing my tea with no caffeine to the next date. But I think that approach is right. You have to approach it directly, because if you don't, it's going to be that cavity that turns into a much bigger beast that's much more difficult to contain. So let's get very practical now. Bookkeeping. I've had a number of questions of folks using QuickBooks, but they're thinking of shifting. What services are out there that both of you love, recommend, and we should know about?
So I'm going to go first on this. In my prior life, I used to do a lot of conversions. They call it general ledger. QuickBooks is general ledger. A lot of conversions, and we have this phrase: "There's no such thing as a good conversion." Okay. On average, the stats are, and this is for actually large companies who have a lot of money to throw at things. They say on average it takes 18 months, 80% of the companies, it takes 18 months before they get to where they used to be before they converted. Right? So think about this. As a small business, you can't be wasting that time to get to where you used to be in the hopes of getting better. So that's why I say QuickBooks is a pair of jeans that you bought, that you want a new pair. It's not so good anymore. Maybe it doesn't fit as well, loose, tight, whatever, but they still work. It still works. You keep wearing those jeans, it just gets converted to something else. You wear them until you cannot possibly utilize it anymore, because the cost to convert is very high. And your chances of executing it well are not as good because you don't do it all the time. And the people who do it usually charge a lot of money. So it's got to be, stay with what you know until the benefit or the upside or the cost of not upgrading is is worth the pain and the risk that you're going to take to convert. So don't buy a new general ledger system that's beyond. QuickBooks has come a long ways. Okay, so I used to not really care for it, but they've done a very good, I know they're probably putting me on their list as they hear it now, but they've done a lot to really improve their process. And you can actually, they've made it very viable to utilize this. It's very flexible. So it offers a lot of the same capacities as much more expensive ones. Because right now, just look at the cost. A lot of the online, or a lot of the next level systems are going to online versions where you pay a subscription price. And you do for QuickBooks too, but it's very nominal. But you have to be pretty, in my opinion, you have to know what you're getting out of it, the benefit that you're getting out, or the cost that you're saving. If you're going to be spending $500, $1,000, $2,000 or more on a monthly basis for that general ledger upgrade, not to mention the person who's going to have to do it for you. Every time you get a little bit more complex, right, it means that somebody has to have a little bit more skill set. Right now, the common language is QuickBooks. If everybody knows how to use QuickBooks, how big or how small you are. So it's a given skill, like Excel. Everybody knows it. You don't have to train them for it. When you start to get segmented into smaller or more specialized or higher level software, it means that the population of accountants and bookkeepers that have that skill becomes narrower. It means you're probably going to have to pay them more money. It makes it harder for you to manage and know if they're doing a good job or not, right? Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, okay? Because absolutely, when you grow, you're going to get to a point where you're going to have to upgrade. But I usually see 90% of the people I see shouldn't have converted, and only 10% of the people clients that I'm looking at say, well, you need to upgrade. So again, I really think about it and know what you're doing, instead of just, sometimes people go, oh, I'm on QuickBooks and they don't think it has cachet, or, it's not as sexy, or the big companies have it, or my competitors all use blank. Find out how much it costs and what are you getting out of it, and what do you not have by using QuickBooks. Be an informed consumer.
Well, we're gonna wear those jeans as long as possible. So
cut them off, make shorts.
Christina is joining us from Mexico, and she has a follow-up question to this. So she understands how to track her income, but she's wondering of any tips on how to really monitor your expenses, either for your business or personally. So Natalie or Laura, any answers to that?
Yeah, I think it also depends on how often you're getting income, right? And how often you have your expenses, right? Some people say, oh, certain end of the month is when I'm getting paid. And so making time for yourself to figure out, okay, these are the days that I have to make sure I sit down and look at those expenses. And as earlier we were talking about, where does your income come from? Maybe you have not only products, but you have services. Maybe you have collaboration. So it's multiple income streams. And that's the key, right? You don't want to just rely on one way of how you're getting paid. So understanding that you need to make time to figure out how often you're doing this, how often you're going to be monitoring it. And I know a lot of people are watching this thinking like, oh, it's already overwhelming, thinking about like having to keep track of everything, making time, aside from everything else. And we're talking about growth, right? So I always think about when I started in college, I started doing bookkeeping, and it was like, everything was on a ledger, old school, writing it down. And then I transferred it to Excel. I'm not dating myself, right? Everything was on Excel, and then eventually to QuickBooks. And don't beat yourself up if you feel like, I don't understand QuickBooks. It's like, it all takes time. It's part of that growth. But going back to that question is understanding your business. Like, how often are you going to be projecting ahead, right? And saying, at these couple months are where we spend a lot more money to build, or whatever it is that your product might be. And how often are you going to sit down and really go through it? And for me, the best advice I got from my CPA was, in the beginning, I started doing it on my own. And she's like, what happens is we're not looking out for the right things too. Sometimes we have no idea that this is a tax write-off, or that, this is something that I'm spending too much money on this particular one. It should be the opposite, because this is what's really bringing me more income, right?
Yep. Yep.
And that was the best thing that she had told me, because, in the beginning I was like, oh, I'm doing this. And she's like, and it's worth paying someone that knows that expertise. because then what happens, you not only miss out on this stuff, but then you also start getting stressed out. Like I still get stressed out when I do my taxes, but I always tell people,
Everybody does. Everybody does. Okay.
and I always say, the best thing you can do is, I do like that saying, the more money, the more problems, because
Yes.
that means you have more options. That also means you can hire people that will also help you along the way. And when you start hiring someone like, someone that can work with you, instead of having to do it on your own, you could say, is you learn with them. So don't feel that you have to know, or that everybody knows what they're doing, because majority of people don't. And some people that I've come across that have successful businesses, they're still struggling on how to understand that. So it lets me know that I'm like, okay, we're on the right path. So understanding that you need to figure out what's that best time for you.
So Natalie, to your point, let's dig in a little deeper on that. So what are the telltale signs and to know when you should outsource and hire an accountant? And Laura, I know this is your domain and your business. How do you know when you need to come to Laura and say, hey, I need CFO support? Are there certain sales numbers, or what are the signs that you need additional help and should be paying for it?
Yeah, if you already off the hand, like I always tell people, what do your personal finances look like? And it does have a reflection on how you're going to handle your business finances. So a lot of people say, oh, my personal finances are all over the place. Then that's the time where you should say, I should invest in getting a bookkeeper or accountant, whatever. Obviously, you're going to be paying more for that. But if you feel like maybe you are okay with your personal finances, then understand that the moment you start bringing in, let's say for first $1,000, if you feel like that's already too much for you to handle, to figure out where that goes, then that's the time where you should really seek out that type of help. And having this type of community, I mean, I know NAWBO, I know all these other organizations, they will connect you with other people and say, oh yeah, you know what, when I first made my first, 20,000, that's when I was like, I need more help with this, right? And so I know for some people, they're like, oh, I'm only bringing in a few $100s here and there, and then it's gradually going a few thousand, then that's something that they feel like they could still handle. But like I said, if you feel your personal finances are all over the place, then you need to help yourself and educate yourself on what you need to do, but also start asking for some of that help. Because something I always say, I'm like, there's a lot of things I don't know. And it's always evolving. It's always changing. Laws are always changing. Now that we see what's going on with COVID,
Yes.
There's new programs that are out. There's new loans that are out. And beware of predatory lending, right? Beware of those areas where they try to take advantage of women, especially for women of color. And so that's something I always say is kind of ask around, ask if you have a mentor, ask them, like, who do they recommend, and connect with women like this, because they will obviously be able to connect you with the right people too.
And Carol is asking a follow-up question for Laura. So Natalie, you hit on this. There's so many crooked bookkeepers, accountants. Laura, how do you avoid those crooked folks and make sure that you're going to a credible, trusted source?
So I say this about any industry. For every class, I was picking on doctors the other day. There's a top half of the doctor class and the bottom half, right? And so you need to know who the good people are. So, as far as a good bookkeeper, the more you are knowledgeable about that particular industry, the more you can go outside of the guidelines that I'm going to give you. So, for example, there are bookkeepers out there who have accounting degrees, and there are bookkeepers who are kind of self-taught. I'm not saying the self-taught ones are bad, but I am saying that if you are not knowledgeable of how things should be done, then you're not going to know if that person who is self-taught has all of the knowledge and skills that a trained bookkeeper does. So they could have a college education, they could be certified, they could have taken specialty courses. So I would look at education. 2, I would look at the people who they work with. What's their current workload, and clients, whom hopefully I got from references. But if they tell me they have 3 clients, that says something to me versus, oh, I have a lot of clients, I've been doing this for a long time. Again, I'm not saying somebody who's new is going to be worse, but if you don't have the skill set to know it, then I would go with somebody more experienced and established first, until you get more knowledgeable. Find out if they have an industry specialty, because some industries, it makes a difference. And going back to something that Natalie said about, how do you know when you need somebody, you need a tax person right away because tax law is very complex. So, for example, even with what we do, we say we know enough tax law to be dangerous. And because taxes keep changing and it's very industry specific, it's state specific, it could be county and city specific, you need somebody who's going to specialize in that area of what you do and help you avoid the problems that you could have, right? They're also a great person, and they should be talking to you. So you'll have somebody good who wants to talk to you, learns about your business, is willing to touch base with you, not to just say, hey, when are you going to get me your stuff in? They should be talking to you about what are your plans, where do you think you are as far as revenue side. They should be touching base with you right before the deadlines are filing before year end, so you could change things, make expenditures, cut back, whatever, So you really need to have I'm sorry, I just went off here on having a good tax person. But it's regarding the bookkeeper, references matter a lot. And I know people say, well, they're only going to tell me the good ones. But if they could pull together 3 good ones, they're known in the community, they're not fly by night, that is your best way of finding somebody for the pool. After that, you have to make sure that you set up your processes and procedures. So you're not just hiring a bookkeeper and an accountant and letting it go. I don't care how big or how small you are. There's a thing called internal controls and segregation of duties, kind of like accounting talk. What it means is just because they're your accountant, you don't hand over everything. So when we work with our clients, for example, we always want to be able to view the bank accounts, but we're not allowed to move money. Or we can set it up to move money, but there's somebody who has to be approving that process. I see a lot of people get into trouble with bad bookkeepers, crooked bookkeepers, because 1, they weren't competent, and 2, the business owner gave them access to things and did not monitor what they were doing. So it's 50-50. They were bad or ignorant, and you just, I would like to say you bought a car to drive that you couldn't handle. Okay, so do not engage in an accountant or bookkeeper if you're not willing to put in the time to learning how to manage them and making it easy. A lot of people, I ask, why did you give them access for this? They said, because they said they needed it to do their job, which they don't. And 2, because it was more work if I had to release the funds. But that's what's keeping it under control.
That's a critical point, Laura. So thank you. Only you should be in charge of moving your money, right?
Yes.
So Natalie, in one of your TED Talks, I can't remember which one, you talked a lot about the importance of language. And we received countless questions about FICO. And thanks to your TED Talk, I know it stands for Fair Isaac
Corporation, yep.
But who knows what that stands for. But talk to us a little bit about FICO scores and why that's important, how you can check your FICO score, and really dig into that.
Yeah, a lot of people always ask that question of like, how do I know if I have a good credit score? How does that really help me? And the biggest thing I always tell people is, do you know the difference between an A student and an F student, right? And when someone's going to lend you money, they're not most likely going to give it to the F student because they're like, they didn't do the work, they didn't do the research, they don't have the experience, as opposed to an A student. And I think the biggest thing it was actually on my first talk, I mentioned with your FICO score, your credit score, right? It doesn't reflect who you are as a person, right? It doesn't define who you are, but it does reflect what your spending habits are, what's happened to you in the past. And for many of us, when we find ourselves in financial hardship, I always say it's due to the D's, which is usually debt, disease, or something that basically puts you in an irrational place. So we start making bad financial decisions, or we just drop it all together. And so that affects your FICO score, right? That affects your credit score, right? The better the credit, the higher the credit score you have, let's say over 800, you are the ideal person to lend money to. And so when you're looking out for a business loan, when you're applying for a new credit card, you want that high credit score, because that means you're most likely going to get the lowest interest rate possible. You'll get the best deals, and you have more leverage when you are applying for that business loan, when you are applying for, or just allowing people to ask for money. And, you know, you watch a show and they're like, okay, what are your financials? What's your credit score? They want to know, what are your habits? What are your financial habits that you've had the last 20 something years, however you've established something. And I come across a lot of people that sometimes they're like, oh, I only pay in cash, or I've only done this. And I go, you're hurting yourself, because then that means you have no leverage now. There's no way for them to track that someone lent you money and then now they want it back. So understanding that it doesn't define who you are, but you need to understand how you can either pay down some of that debt, how you can build good debt, because there's good debt and bad debt. Nobody wants debt, right? But understanding that if you do have certain good debt, it can actually help you as well, right? If you own property, guess what? You have a mortgage with some debt, but that's a good type of debt. So your credit score is something that's going to take time to build, and it's so easily that you can ruin it. Identity theft is huge. And so I always tell people, monitor your scores as often as you can, which you could do for free. And I think that's a way for you to also make sure that, like she said, accountants, or sometimes there's crooked bookkeepers, or someone that takes advantage of your identity, and sometimes it's family members or coworkers, whatever it might be. So this is a way for you to make sure you're on top of those things.
And this is really for both of you. Let's talk about credit cards. We've had so many of our entrepreneurs, including folks very tied to our network, who have been confused about, do they take out a credit card with their personal information, in their business information? How do you know what to do for credit cards?
Business first, always business. Okay. But if you are a new business and you don't have a whole lot of history, and you don't have any assets, they're going to ask you to sign for it. They're going to rely on your FICO score in determining whether they should give it. So the preference is always to have everything in your business, but banks are not, they want to protect themselves. So if you have a business, it's brand new, it has no credit history, it doesn't have any assets, they don't want to take the risk, but they're willing to take the risk on you if you have a good credit score, if you have assets, if you are willing to personally guarantee it. Now, I would prefer that to protect the individual, that you not have to personally guarantee things. But most banks, I'd say, unless you have a lot of assets that can cover the amount of the loan, they're going to ask you to personally guarantee those kinds of loans. Credit cards, eventually you'll be able to move out of your personal name into your business, but it'll just take time, as Natalie said. So, but general rule, put it into your business if possible.
So Yvonne is asking specifically how you establish your business credit line. So is that using your credit card, showing that you're paying things back?
So initially when you start out, you can set up a bank account in your business name. You should set it up in your business name. And after you've been operating for a while, you started out, you have revenue coming in, you have expenses, you're not in a loss, then you go to them and say, I've been using my personal credit card for my business. Can we get a business card? And most likely they will provide it to you, as long as you don't have credit issues, FICO scores, defaulted checks, they'll give that to you. So you're starting off low. Say, hey, sometimes some banks, if you're new, they don't want to give you the credit. Say, I'm willing to put up an investment. I'm willing to put up $10,000 in a CD if you give me a $7,000 bank credit card. And you start building it up, and you go in and you ask for a higher limit, and eventually you ask for that to be I'm not tied to your CD, but your average business balance. Okay, so that start to get that credit card. Then go to them for a line. Once you've established that history and that relationship, and tell the bank this is what you're doing, so they know that they can help you just progress on and on. So in a very short period of time, you should be able to have a bank account, as long as you're financially viable. You can't default, you can't not make late payments, you can't be a flake, right? But if you're doing your job, you're making money, it doesn't have to be a lot, but you're showing progression and volume, you're a good customer, they will help you grow. Pretty soon you'll have that credit line. And then eventually you can go to them for a term loan too. So that's how it's normally done. There's ways to get around it, but this is to me, the easiest way. It costs you the least amount of money. And then once you've been a customer of a bank and have a relationship manager, you're a good customer. They're going to want to take care of you. They'll give you other access to other options, benefits, maybe a reduced credit card, interest rates, maybe they'll waive your bank fees. So,
and if I may, shop around too, because like Krisha said, you have an established relationship with your bank, but it doesn't mean that they always know that someone else has a better promotion. So chances are you can come back and say, you know what, someone else is offering me this. Can you match it or do better? And chances are they'll take you.
Remember, 3.
I always tell people just shop around too, because you can negotiate everything. Like I say, insurance policy, all these things. Just because you have business with them and they want to keep your business, come back and say, I've done my research and this is what I can do. What can you do? And chances are they'll work with you.
Natalie, so many small business owners are struggling with their stores being closed or a lack of sales at this crazy time during the pandemic. At what point should someone consider bankruptcy?
Oh, that's such a difficult one. And I know Laura's probably going to have a little better with that. But right now, I've been telling this a lot, especially the last few webinars we've done, is really look at yourself as far, how long you've been in business for, right? If you're a startup, then guess what? There's an opportunity for you to reinvent yourself, right? To pivot, maybe collaborate with someone else or partner with someone else, right? Instead of having to do it all on your own. When I've seen a lot of women, they're like, oh, I really want to make it work. I've been in business for a while. I'm like, your ship is sinking. So if there's already that hole is letting that water in. So can you figure out a way you can sell maybe some of those assets? Maybe you have, a textile company, whatever it might be that can help you save yourself, right? As opposed to, I'm just going to take it to the end. It's like, well, then you're left with nothing, right? And so I think that's something the difficult part of having to reflect and back and look at what your statements have looked like and what you can project. And I think many of us are going through that phase where you're like, okay, what does the next 12 months look like? What does, a lot of people are just like, what does the next month look like? So really just being honest with yourself, getting that professional help, like, we've been talking about, I really do recommend talking to a CPA and accountant because of the tax laws that are out there. If you don't qualify for certain grants, you can't necessarily just rely on that type of, money to help you out. But it's taking that reflection and saying, okay, can I at least walk away with something as opposed to nothing, or dig myself deeper? And I think that's where I see a lot of people make that mistake where they held on too long because it was their first business. And it's like, it's okay. I've known many people, it's like, the first couple businesses did not work out and then they built that traction. So I think it's really important to understand that you need to know, that's why you need to know what your finances look like. You need to know what kind of clients you have too, because some people are like, oh, I have this particular client that I've always had. Well, how do you know if they can no longer afford you? How do you know if they've lost their business or their income? And so we can't necessarily just rely on that one area. And I know that's a very hard topic and we want to try to stay away from bankruptcy or, declaring those things because that does affect your score when you want to come back for a loan and it stays on your history for years. And so, there's ways to try to figure out what works best for you. But I always tell people, I recommend talking to you, if you have a CFP or a CPA, sit down and really just kind of go through some of your options before it's too late. And then you're like inside the boat that's sunk, right?
That's so critical that you talk to somebody because sometimes people will say, okay, I have too much debt. Revenue doesn't look like it's coming in. I owe all this money. I should declare bankruptcy. And in many times, and particularly during these COVID times, we have negotiated for our clients where you go in and they look, you owe $50,000 and they're willing to say, don't pay us the $50,000, cover our costs, which was only 15, but that shares something with you, right? And so look, now they've released you from that debt for $15,000 versus $50,000. Maybe you can stay in business if you went to all of your vendors that way and said, really, I can't pay you. Most vendors they don't want you to go bankrupt, because the reason why you're going bankrupt is you have no money left. So don't be in that position. Don't run it down to zero. Before you're there, when you're feeling concerned about not having that revenue coming in, talk to somebody and say, can we go through and look at all our different vendors and ask them, what are they willing to settle for? Many of them will. Sometimes they'll say, look, no, I can't forgive it for you, but I can convert it into a loan. Pay me $500 a month for forever. So again, you don't want to, if it's so devastating, yes, and there's no way you can get out from under, then sometimes bankruptcy is a viable option. But you pay a humongous price for that. Sometimes if you have a bankruptcy on your record, you are going to have a hard time getting loans from an orthodox bank. It means some clients can't do business with you, large corporations, because you have a bankruptcy online. It means that certain governmental programs you won't be able to take advantage of, and you never know it until you actually find out. You know, everybody, you look good, it's great. That bankruptcy doesn't drop off of your record for a long time. So don't even get to that point. Don't make that decision yourself. Talk to somebody to see if you can avoid that. And very often that, especially now in COVID, people are willing to help.
It's a true last resort. Natalie, I know our community would love more tools from you to strengthen our mental wellness as we strengthen our financial wellness. So I know you're going to lead us in an exercise, and I know we're over on time. So for those that need to leave us, know that this will be on YouTube as well. But Natalie, take it away.
Yeah, I think I'm always learning something new, and when I do, sometimes that brings a lot of anxiety. And when we're talking about our finances, we have this natural adrenaline, right? If anyone's ever sat down and you're paying your bills and you start looking at like, oh my gosh, I have to pay this, or why did I spend so much money? There's this natural adrenaline that's causing the anxiety or that stress. So we always want to come from a place of rationality, or at least feeling grounded, right? Because when we are in a better mental state, we make better decisions. At least we know, we look at our options. And so for me, I'm a big advocate on meditation, dance, whatever will help you get out of that funk or coming from a place of scarcity, right? We want to come from a place of abundance. So this breathing exercise, it's actually, you hold it for 8, you inhale for 8, hold for 8, and release for 8. But for this purposes, we're going to do it together 3 times, and we're going to do it 3, 3, 3. So you're going to close your eyes, and this will help you stay more present. So close your eyes, and you're going to inhale for 3. Ready? Inhale. Hold. Release. Keep your eyes closed. Do it again. Inhale. Hold. Release. Now take a deep breath again. Hold. Release. Keep your eyes closed. And I want you to tell yourself, today you invested your time, your energy, you learned, you will apply it, you'll become more financially savvy, you're going to connect with the Tory Burch Foundation, you're going to figure out what's best for you, you're on your right path, because all it takes is 1 step at a time. Open your eyes. And all of us, we felt that your energy just drop a little bit, and that's really crucial. If you could do it for a longer period of time, do it. Taking that time to do it every time. I always do it every time before I pay my bills, before I'm about to make, a lease, pay, purchase something, these are the things where we need to make sure we're on the right path to making the right financial decisions in a calm and rational state.
Thank you, Natalie. I know I'm seeing lots of praise and gratitude for some deep breaths during this session, so thank you. So we've covered a lot: loans, budgets, bookkeepers, credit scores. But before we go, Natalie and Laura, what's one action step you really want everyone here to implement into either their personal or business or both financial fitness routine?
Yeah, I would recommend today, I like giving homework, is sit down and write down what your strengths and weaknesses are. That'll help build your confidence, and then it'll also allow you to reflect on those areas you might need help, right? Maybe you're like, this is the time to get a CPA, or this is the time to take some courses that are going to help me elevate my business? And just doing that alone will just make you remind yourself, I am great. I am a great boss, because those are the things that I'm really good at. And this is why I started doing what I do. So do that today. At least 10 things, 10 of your strengths and any of your weaknesses, because you'll improve. Those weaknesses won't always be weaknesses. Eventually they'll become your strengths.
Thank you, Natalie.
And I want everybody to take their business financial statements and go over them line by line, so that in each line, you know who are the vendors that you're paying, or who are the customers that make up that line. And then I want you to understand how those expenses get you more money or save you more money. I want you to write it down, not just like scan it, okay? Because when you go through that, you're going to be going, and why am I still paying for water when we're in COVID and nobody's in the office and everybody just forgot about it? Or why are we paying for car insurance on these cars that nobody is using, right? Or, wow, this customer has been paying on the other side routinely. Has anybody been in touch with them? They're still, I've got we're focusing on the customers that can't pay us. What about the ones that can still pay us? Why are they still paying us? Can they buy more, right? So again, I spend that time to get to know your operation and how it actually relates to your financials. If you do that one thing, not just once, so that if I came in and I asked you, oh, how much is this in rent? You could tell me what your rent was, who was your vendor, and why you needed all that space, and how much money you're making off of that. We'll be reading about you in Forbes and Inc. I promise.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you both. This has been incredible. We could spend hours together, but I know we're limited on time. So how can our community follow along with your work? Instagram, what's the best way to connect with you both?
Yeah, my Instagram is Financially Savvy Latina, and actually all of my works, my books, my podcast, anything content is financiallysavvy20minutes.com. So definitely reach out. And I actually listed today some of my favorite books, resources, all about free resources too. So make sure you check that out in the stories too. But anyway, I'd be happy to help and keep connected with this type of group, because this is all accountability. This is a group that's going to help you. Thank you for having me today.
Natalie.
So people can reach out to me individually at LinkedIn. Especially from a business perspective, give me some time. I get high volume, but if you message me, I will get back to you. I'm also on Facebook, but that's not so, that's more a combination of really my different groups that I belong to. And actually, my social media person just convinced me to open an Instagram business as opposed to my personal, because on my personal you'll get to see all my love for dogs, national parks, and shoes. So anyway, LinkedIn is the best way to
see that too, Laura. So we'll have to look at both.
And purses, bags. That's what that's my I consider them an investment. This is just a small piece here. And I tell people that because one, well, I love them, and two, they have a high resale value. Shoes don't, clothes don't, unless you're buying design or whatever. Jewelry sometimes, but actually handbags have one of the best. It's not like you're buying it and tossing it, right? So especially in this economy with reuse, resell, whatever, even though you never do it, because I always keep mine forever, and they're on. I look at them. In my head, I can classify them as an investment as opposed to a cost.
So mac and cheese, thanks to Laura, and handbags. So thank you.
That's great. That's what people are going to take away from, as opposed to finance.
Giving us permission for both. So thank you both. This has been wonderful. We'll make sure to follow along with your work and stay in touch. And thanks everyone.